Did you know 2 months in our calendar are named after Roman emperors? July from Julius Caesar, and August from Augustus, traces of power that still mark our time. The echo of an empire that once organized the world. Also, the roads you drive, the laws you trust, the alphabet you read, Rome is everywhere. At its height, in the early 2nd century CE, Rome spanned about 5 million square kilometers, from Britain to Egypt, from Portugal to Mesopotamia. Imagine weeks on stone roads, the same mile markers sliding past, dues paid at the same state courier posts, laws read aloud in a language that felt familiar in every forum you entered. But how did this giant collapse 3 times? Stay to the end. We'll break down the end of the Republic, the fall of the Western Empire, and the fall of Constantinople, plus leadership and stability lessons that still matter today. The Roman Republic was born from a promise of balance. 2 consuls alternating command, a senate to deliberate, and popular assemblies to vote. Yet, beneath the surface, old fractures never truly healed. Between patricians who inherited power and plebeians who demanded a share. From the 12 tables to the tribunate, reforms made room, but also opened new rounds of competition for influence. As wars expanded the borders and wealth, inequality swelled. Small plots were absorbed into latifundia, veterans crowded into the city for work, and politics shifted from legal debate to the pursuit of patronage. At this point, Gaius Marius's military reforms changed the locus of loyalty. Soldiers no longer depended on inherited land, but on a general's promises of land and pensions. Oaths to the Republic were still spoken, but tangible rewards came from a commander's hand. The next precedent grew starker. Lucius Cornelius Sulla seized Rome by force, wrote lists of enemies, and called it a restoration of order. From then on, the road to power ran not only through speeches in the Forum, but through legionary columns in the city streets. The Republic still stood, but its supports tilted. The law slowed. Private ambition ran faster. From the north came years of victories. The Gallic campaigns raised Gaius Julius Caesar from an ambitious general to a living legend. Spoils, loyal troops, and surging popularity made him more than an office holder. He became a pole bending political gravity toward himself. In Rome, an old ally and partymate, Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, now stood with the Senate. Suspicion rose. Mandates were scrutinized, and a deadline to return without troops was set. In the winter of 49 BCE, the line arrived. On the banks of the Rubicon, Caesar weighed obedience against career ruin. He stepped, and with that step, civil war began. Pompey withdrew to Greece to gather strength. At Pharsalus, 48 BCE, Caesar's lighter formations bent the enemy plan. Pompey fled to Egypt and met a bitter end. Caesar paused in Alexandria to settle a throne, then returned to Rome not only a victor, but a breaker of deadlock. In that brief breathing space, reforms ran fast. The calendar was revised, debt partly addressed, citizenship widened, and the administrative machine freshly oiled. But the title, dictator, originally a short emergency remedy, lingered longer than was comfortable. Old fears stirred. Was this the cure or the onset of monarchy? Ides of March, 44 BCE. On the marble floor of the Senate, steel flashed. Conspirators, some of them political friends, thought their knives would save the Republic. What burst instead was the cork on chaos. The city boiled, allies rallied, and the liberators fled east. The vacuum was filled by a stopgap alliance. Octavian, Caesar's political heir, Mark Antony, eloquent and hard, and Lepidus, the steady broker, together forming the Second Triumvirate. Proscriptions were read. Sulla's ghost seemed to pass again through Rome's streets. At Philippi, 42 BCE, the armies of Brutus and Cassius, the leaders of the conspiracy, composition. Victory, but not peace. Cracks inside the alliance widened. Interests collided. Territories were parceled. And Roman opinion turned east, to Antony and Cleopatra. In 31 BCE, at Actium, Octavian's lean, well-drilled fleet rolled the opposition. Antony and Cleopatra withdrew and chose their fate in Alexandria. Octavian sailed home, the last victor. In 27 BCE, a seemingly modest political settlement changed everything. The Senate conferred the title Augustus. No crown was placed, no title king proclaimed. Yet the state's machinery quietly centralized. A Principate was born. A republic still performed on stage, while the energy of sovereignty flowed into a single body. From the chaos of swords and speeches, Rome entered a long order later called the Pax Romana. Pax Romana faded, and the machine that had run quietly began to creak. In a restless century, power passed from hand to hand at a wearying tempo. Emperors rose and fell like short waves in a harbor. Inflation gnawed at prices, plague swept the cities, and frontiers that once flexed stiffened, demanding more troops, more taxes, more loyalty than the state could buy. Seeking a remedy, Diocletian spread the burden across 4 backs, 2 Augusti and 2 Caesaries in a Tetrarchy. On parchment, the load lightened. Each horizon had a ready ruler. In practice, loyalties split to the 4 winds. The borders calmed for a moment, but the currency of politics was paid with a new coin called fragmentation. From the ruins of that compromise, Constantine emerged to re-thread power, founding Constantinople at the heart of Eastern trade and defense. The new city became a hook that fastened the wealthiest provinces, its sheltered harbor, a giant chain that could bar the inlet, and walls that slowly became legend. Meanwhile, the east-west divide widened. One side grew richer, the other labored under older debts. Then came a shock that jarred old certainties. In 378, at Adrianople, Valens, emperor of the East, fell with his legions. Not merely a defeat, a reality check. Legionary tactics that once locked in victory no longer worked against Goths who were angry, seasoned, and embittered by mistreatment when they sought refuge. From that day, the aura of invincibility thinned. Decades turned, and Rome, the city that had seemed untouchable, became a prize. In 410, Alaric led the Visigoths into Rome. Fire and fear taught Europe a new word for endings: sack. 45 years later, in 455, the Vandals repeated the lesson, quicker, harsher in memory. A world that once orbited Rome now circled above it like birds at dusk. Meanwhile, the internal structure split at many joints. Revenues shrank as trade faltered and fields underperformed. Latifundia widened the social chasm. Patronage politics bound officials to factions rather than to the state. Mercenaries filled recruiting gaps, bringing swords along with bills that could not always be paid. And as succession was more often decided by the barracks than by law, legitimacy became increasingly costly. Finally, in 476, a Germanic commander named Odoacer deposed Romulus Augustulus. No great conquest happened that day, only a conclusion long prepared by small fractures. The West lost its crown, leaving a mosaic of new kingdoms upon old foundations. Ask why the West fell, and the answer is not a single stone dropped, but a wall ground down by scale no longer governable, revenues no longer sufficient, elites no longer united, armies no longer reliable, and succession no longer clear. The spiral was simple, if painful. When taxes can no longer fund the army, and the army will no longer secure the taxes, the state stands, hollow at the center. As the West cracked, the East learned endurance. Constantinople, half city, half fortress, stood at the crossing of the Bosporus, fastening silk and spice routes and trading news, coin, and faith. The layered Theodosian walls made the first 1,000 feet toward the city feel like 1,000 years. Ditch, outer wall, inner wall, each layer draining courage and logistics. In the harbor, a giant chain stretched across the mouth of the Golden Horn. When lowered, iron turned the inlet into a water prison. On the towers, watchmen lit beacons, points of fire calling to one another from mountains to coast, carrying warnings to the palace in hours, not weeks. In the arsenal, a liquid secret passed from mouth to ear: Greek fire, a flame that burned even on water, a terror to fleets that strayed too near. Yet empire was not only walls and fire, it was also politics and faith. Theological debates shook the palace. A schism split east and west, but merchants and scholars kept crossing, bringing ceramics, silk, manuscripts, and techniques. From the 11th century, the Crusades filled the corridors of history. At first allies bound for the Holy Land, then, during the Fourth Crusade, 1204, a storm that tore the empire's heart. The city was taken, treasure hauled away, libraries wounded. Though the Palaiologos dynasty reclaimed Constantinople half a century later, its territory had shrunk. The empire was restored without the same breath. The 15th century arrived with a new map of power. Across the strait, the Ottomans grew: organization, money, and technology. Mehmed II, young and resolute, saw the city not merely as a prize, but as a key. He gathered craftsmen, casters, and logisticians. In the siege, metal spoke a new tongue: giant guns that hurled stone and lashed brick laid by centuries. On land, batteries crept forward step by step. At sea came the move every witness recorded. Ships hauled overland, greased and rolled on timbers, slipped into the Golden Horn behind the chain. Constantine XI rallied what remained: about 7,000 defenders, soldiers, Genoese volunteers, townspeople. They patched breaches, shared arrows, and waited for the drum. Day folded into night, prayer mingled with iron. On 29th May 1453, the final assault came. The hammer of cannon, ladders, rubble. At Blackerneye, the line broke. The emperor doffed his insignia and chose to fight in the front ranks. Accounts differ on his final moments, but all agree on one thing: the city fell. With the fall of Constantinople, a timeline turned its page. Trade routes shifted, pushing European crowns to face the ocean and redraw the map, launching long voyages, shocks of exchange, and, in time, colonial stories that reshaped Africa and Asia. Technology, logistics, and coalitions finally overcame the combination of walls, tradition, and reputation. The Eastern Roman Empire ended, but its knowledge seeped into Renaissance workshops: Greek texts, geometry, rhetoric, old shards for a new world. Rome did not fall in a single day. It loosened, cracked, and collapsed in 3 great acts. From a republic that slowly lost the supports of its law, to a West exhausted by scale, rivalry, and shortage, to an East that held with walls and craft, yet yielded to guns, logistics, and new coalitions. We invoke Rome's legacy whenever we read the Latin alphabet, walk a road, or trust the principle innocent until proven guilty. That legacy stitches yesterday to this very moment and asks the same question: which institutions must we tend, and what new tools must we understand before they knock at the door? Name one takeaway that matters today. Comment below, hit subscribe, and turn on the bell so you won't miss the next episode. Thanks for watching. Until next time, we'll keep whispering the world to you.